The funny thing is,
They go up to the golf course on Promontory and they get a little irritated about that.
Yeah, but he seems to have adjusted now.
Problem is
Hopefully
that
he'll be all right.
there's no financial incentive for any
Tessie's like, I had to go up this canyon, down this canyon. I'm like,
Yeah, I got a
Tessie just
15,
simply walked
all
over
the
the
things
hill.
that we need.
Mom walked up the
Almost 16
canyon,
months.
back down the
There's no
canyon,
incentive
over
for
that hill, and over
tight.
that one and back over that one because Tessie can't drive.
And the only
That's not
reason
good.
they're trying to do stuff now is to
But
prevent
you can fit
financial
in.
yeah,
disadvantage of
sounds like it's good work.
it's Weight
Good height.
Watchers.
He is a very stubborn little child when it comes to that. He just is taking his time. He's really fast at crawling, so he likes to default to that. He does take steps now and again.
Where's everyone?
I have a grandson that's
You guys
about
have
the same
class?
age as your boy then,
Yeah,
and he's not walking either.
yeah. Apparently walking or
Five?
talking, so.
Fine.
Nobody can
Somebody have
grunt
to have
with the best
six?
of them.
Yep,
He knows what he wants and he can grunt with them.
yeah, that's my
Are you
boy.
guys at 5 for a quorum?
Yeah,
Okay.
yep.
Good evening. Sorry to start a few minutes late. Welcome to our joint meeting with our City Council and Planning Commission. I always take this opportunity to appreciate to shout out our Planning Commission since we don't see you as often, and appreciate all you do for our city and the time you spend really doing the getting into the detail with a lot of our projects. So we appreciate you being here and always look forward to this chance to meet together. Tonight, we just have one item on the agenda, but I do need to get approval of the minutes first.
So moved.
Motion by Sherry,
Second.
second by Teddy. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, everybody. Okay, we'll just jump into item 2, discussion regarding an HTRZ overlay zone. Michael?
Thank you. This item was prepared by Blake Thomas, our community development director. Sadly, he's in Italy. And,
That's rough.
So,
So sad.
really, this is just an opportunity to really bring our commission members up to speed on some conversations that the city administration and our elected officials have been having with our development partner in Olympia. And it really is trying to see if there's an opportunity to take advantage of some legislation that was adopted in 2021 by the Utah State Legislature. And you received a copy of that in your packet, SB 217. And I just have a few slides really for reference, for conversation tonight. And, do the switch pointers. And then also maybe a few discussion prompts. But the council and the commission certainly welcome to move in any direction you would like. I know that in Blake's staff report at the end, there was just a request for direction. What does this body want the administration to do as we have been discussing this topic with our development partner? So this is a map of the city. This is the area of the Olympia Master Development Agreement that was approved by the city a couple of years ago. This is the land use map that was adopted at the time of the approval. The project would potentially modify that map, by adding a new housing and transit reinvestment zone. And we're anticipating that this would be an overlay, a zoning overlay tool. So that would be kind of like one part of the project that the city would have to create and adopt an overlay. And then we would also need to talk about if we were to apply it within the Olympia project, how would that impact the land use, the design standards, even the MDA agreement itself. So there'll be multiple kind of stages or steps that would be involved in moving forward on this project. As I mentioned, we would anticipate, because this amends potentially the amount of dwelling units that would be developed within this project. As you saw in the staff report, to do a housing and transit reinvestment overlay or zone, you need to have an average minimum density of 50 units per acre, which is obviously much higher than what we had anticipated within the Olympia project. It also has to be within a 1/3 mile of a transit hub as defined in the state in SB 217. And obviously we don't have that either. So we would have to work with the state to identify the location of a future transit hub and also coordinate the commitments from our regional transportation planning partners that they would begin to plan for and invest in a transportation system that would create that transit hub. So there are a lot of hurdles in front of us, but obviously the first one is to gauge our level of interest and our support for moving this forward. There'll be steps that would be required to be taken by the development group or the private kind of partner in this project, and then also steps that would be required by the city to take as well. And principally, that's going to be, as I mentioned, in addition to creating an overlay, which you had as a very preliminary draft copy attached to your packet of materials. It was just one page. It was really more of a placeholder. It's something that would obviously grow. The development partner has been working with their attorney, their consulting attorney, again, Bruce Baird, whom we all have worked with. And I believe that he, in addition to our team, our city attorney, and our administration team, would work on creating that overlay. We would need to adopt that overlay, but eventually we would need to amend our agreement and also our design guidelines, as well as the maps within the MDA. So really, I think the first kind of step that we've been already engaged in as an administration, as the council, as you've been talking, I believe, one-on-one with this development partner, is just kind of understanding what does the code require, what is the process. There are a number of things that need to be done. Reports need to be produced, reviewed by the state and approved. You know, what is the plan in order to take advantage of this increment, tax reinvestment. Obviously, the state needs to approve the structure of that plan. And then, what are the opportunities potentially for the city, for the development partner? What are the benefits? Who benefits from this, investment, from this direction? And then what are the risks, if any? Are the risks to the city? Does it somehow, overcommit the resources of the city? Or, it's just kind of an idea for discussion. Gauging our interest. Again, do we want to continue to move forward in these conversations and working as a partner with this development team? Mentioned earlier again that the overlay, we would need to adopt that, to prepare it and adopt it. I'm going backwards, sorry. Are there any options if we're going to be amending the MDA agreement? Are there some things in that agreement? Maybe there are certain required elements that would have to be amended, but are there some opportunities there, some other things that might be negotiable? I don't know. And then again, the process. This was just really identifying what is the city's kind of legislative role. We're going to be working on the overlay and those amendments. But again, as you looked at HB 217, there's a study and some materials that have to be prepared and submitted to the state. That would be funded and developed by the development partner. So they would have some other additional steps besides this. They obviously would be coordinating with us, but there's a variety of steps involved. So again, those are just some discussions for prompt. So where do you want to go with this? What are your thoughts? What are your concerns? Timeline on this? I haven't heard, Nathan. Has there been kind of an expectation as to how long this might take to explore this?
So there are a couple things to be aware of. There are a limited number of these for bus rapid transit, which is really what we've been talking about in state law. There's only so many that are allowed. We've met with the development team a couple times. They've shown, and I think they met with the individual counselors, it's kind of in a round robin approach, to just lay out, here's the idea. So the council has not, I think, formally talked about it, but there are studies that we have to, a consultant has to be hired that goes through, figures out your amount. For the BRT, we have to allow anywhere from 40 to 50 units per acre, but you only get 60%. If it was fixed rail, then you can get up to the 80%. There's a lot of stuff outside of our control, but because of the limited number, when we met with the developers, like, okay, you need to move this forward. So I would say that the council and the commission, if we're serious about doing something like this, we would want to have our overlay in place fairly soon, simply so that process can move forward.
Yeah, one thing I know in discussing this with Blake and his conversations, creating the overlay tool is one step. Applying it is a second step. And I believe we only have to create the tool itself.
Correct. At this point, we have to create the tool that the state, the requirements to the state, I think also have some, we were just talking about that there, I think certain times of year they consider these. Again, they've put a cap on HTRZs in state law, how many of these they'll allow. But I do believe you have to have created the zone in order to apply. One thing we should point out here, we currently do not have a bus rapid transit. It feels a little bit like a chicken and the egg. They want us to zone for it and do it. UTA wants to see the ridership before they'll put it in place, but you're zoning as if it exists, which would be a real parking nightmare. So some of that is, we'd require the developer to twist their political arms like they normally do.
So
They're good at that.
you indicated that you have to be within a third of a mile, but that's only for that, it's not for the BRT.
Just for the overlay itself, or, that area that's trying to benefit from the zone, right, the special zone.
So I'm confused, I guess.
Actually a quarter mile
Quarter mile for BRT, and
from the station,
it's a certain amount of, a max number of acres you can apply it to.
100.
So, yeah, it was pretty small.
Yeah.
So I'm confused then, if we're not within a quarter of a mile from that station, how far are we out from getting within a quarter of a mile of that station? And is this delay indefinitely any kind of commercial development that
So
goes in out there?
the proposal right now is that they would propose a BRT station go in, and they would dedicate property for it, so that quarter mile would cover the area they're proposing being the BRT.
So it's not an existing station, it's one that we.
They are,
program in.
correct, they're proposing to UTA that they put one there.
Is this a prerequisite for UTA to come into Harriman?
That's what I was going to say. It's, in our discussions, it's been discussed that that's kind of a contingency. I mean, we don't want to approve a mass amount of density around a station that never exists, right? So it almost has to be a contingent on, like, one, you cannot apply, you can't be approved for an HTRZ zone without an approved BRT. So it all has to come in together, and it's not just going to be a housing component. There will be, actually, it's going to augment the commercial. I mean, there is the housing component, but that's also going to augment the commercial that they were going to be able to bring to this area. It's going to, they'll be able to go above and beyond their minimum expectation, their minimum requirements per the MDA in this area. So it's, by doing that, it's going to be a big hub, like a center. It's going to be a center is what, the new.
Then is the ask going to be to up all the rest of the density in the area because they have X number of units? in the MDA?
That's the discussion to be had.
And those are down the road, so kind of two quick things to answer your question directly. It's not a prerequisite for UTA to come into Harriman. They can come into Harriman anytime they want. We've designated right away. The city actually has donated land. I mean, it's there to be donated for fixed rail, right? And UTA just doesn't want to do it. They're focused on their current operations. They've come out and presented to us several times and flat out told us, we have no plans to extend things your way yet. So this isn't a prerequisite. Huh?
But the two aren't tied together.
Yeah, so this isn't a prerequisite, this is something completely different. So I think the main thing we need to address, especially for anybody who's watching, is why in the world would we do this? I think we need to address that first. What's the benefit? Why are we even considering this, right? I mean, density without infrastructure, has tons and tons of issues. Why in the world would we do this? And the answer is state tax money, right? So South Jordan just got this approved just a ways down the road. Mass amounts of density, but mass amounts of commercial and state tax increment dollars, right? So what was it, a year or two ago? The state legislature told us that we could not do tax increment anymore. Right, so there's no incentives, we can't provide any property tax incentives for commercial entities to come into the city, right? Other areas have gotten theirs, but we can't use that same tool that they have. The only thing that we can offer is the one thing that we need badly, and that's sales tax. That's the only thing that we can offer everybody. So the state axed that, said we can't do that anymore, so school district and others cannot give that tax increment. And then this bill came in, which provided a way to do it if you meet all of these criteria, right? Which is the density, and it has to be around a rapid transit, et cetera. So we obviously don't have rapid transit. We obviously don't have, even though Olympia is the densest place on anywhere we've researched, there would have to be a big change to the plan, whether that's shifting existing density there or a combination of shifting some and adding some. But at least for me, I can't speak for anybody else, as the mayor put it, that's kind of the next part. The first part is we have to have this tool in place, right, to show the legislature, that the decision makers, that we're serious. They're only going to approve a handful of these, and we have to get UTA to agree to put the BRT station there. I mean, those are two pretty heavy lifts. So, and correct me if I'm wrong, but all we're really looking at right now is create this overlay tool that says we're willing to do it. That doesn't mean that that's set in stone. We can change what the tool looks like. It just has to have the base, the minimum requirements that they have. Does that make sense? So it's an idea. This tax increment tool is out there. The state legislature's given, it said we're going to do this and we'll give so many of these. Where does it make sense? Who gets in line first? All of those sorts of things. Does that?
Right, so either, even to get to this point, somebody, the council, Mike, our city manager, somebody took a look at it and made a go, no-go decision, and somebody listed pros and cons and said, this is a good thing for Harriman. Is that correct?
I think we've all said we're open to the idea.
I think the original conversation came from the developer and their commercial guy. The original conversation started at the developer and commercial aspect of it. But it's a great location for it. It's needed out there, especially with the current density it's at.
Where is the South Jordan one?
It's gonna be around the ballpark, in the commercial center.
They're creating there's gonna be a new stop, a new track stop, and it'll be around there. They're doing a downtown Daybreak, they're calling it. It'll be,
I've heard of that, I just wasn't aware of the transit, so, but a new stop.
yeah, a new
It's
stop.
like,
Yeah.
it's 40 to 50 units an acre down there.
It's at
That's
least 50, yeah.
super
Because they're
dense.
doing around the track, so it's at least 50. Big commercial center, big office.
So we're not talking about, none of us have committed to, yeah, we want to do this. We've said
No.
we're open to the idea, and if it's a possibility, we have to do a couple of these minor things to see if there's a possibility down the road.
Yeah, I know I've had that conversation to say I'd be open to the idea, but there's a lot of hurdles to jump.
And I would say, Michael, too, and correct me if it's not, right now the focus is on Olympia, but I'll be honest, my first, at Wasatch Front last week, it was the first time I heard discussion in that meeting about extending the red line. Like, it was mentioned for the first time in a year and a half. There's a momentum again for possibly looking at extending the red line. So it could be, if that red line does extend, in 5 years, we could have to use that
Right.
TRZs on down, down the road somewhere. So it could be applied anywhere, just, we need to have that, just what we talked about, it's a tool, kind of like the master plan.
Yeah, I
our
think-
master
Kid
plan. It's a tool
policy.
in our toolbox.
If I can kind of connect
We had a
a
dot.
series of dots or dominoes, right? So during the annexation of Olympia, the discussion was how much commercial should they be required to build? And the biggest question was, it was undetermined where the intersection of U-111 and 126 South would actually be. And the alignment of that would substantially impact how much commercial they could conceivably create inside their development boundaries versus what South Jordan might do on their side of the boundaries. So now that that final alignment of U-111 and 126 South has been all but decided, it looks like it's going to have 3 of the 4 corners of that intersection will be inside the boundaries of Harriman City. So that creates an opportunity for there to be more commercial. As they were talking about commercial, how to enhance that and bring in more commercial, more retail sales tax dollars, more property tax dollars to the city, there was a question raised of, could we perhaps build more commercial around a transit center? What kind of transit center would that be? That precipitated a discussion about these HTRZ, the bus rapid transit, that kind of thing. So at this point, there is an idea that it could maybe happen is about the best it is. Mm-hmm. But in order to take the next step in finding out what it would be and if it could work, this tool has to be created so that they can start having more serious discussions with legislators and decision makers about what it would look like to come out here and what it would take and how many units and would we approve it and where would they be located. And I mean, those are really big, hard decisions, but they are way down the line from where we are right now.
So for me, it's worth it if it increases the commercial exponentially that we were talking about, and I'll come back to that in a second. And if it brings the needed transportation infrastructure, right? If there's that commitment from the state and these other parties, then there's a better chance we'll get more than just BRT, right? In my opinion, right? So the other part is commercial. So keep in mind, so what we're talking about is this area is the commercial, right, Steve?
Yeah, but it's going to align now. That intersection is going to be this way now. Yeah.
So wherever that intersection U-111 and 126 ends up, the commercial's supposed to be around that area. The rest of this is all South Jordan. All right, it's all been annexed. It's not going to be Harriman. It's South Jordan. So I'm just going to speak out loud or think out loud whether that's good or not. I'll go slow so I don't get myself in trouble. I think my brain goes too fast and I say stuff. But if the state tax increment money incentivizes more and better businesses to be there, right, increases that commercial to a significant degree, say Mountain View Village or bigger, and we capture all of these tax dollars as they come in and out, it's kind of our opportunity to do what Riverton has done to us and capture some of those tax dollars.
Yeah, because they're going to build a lot of houses out there.
They've told us it's all housing.
Yeah,
And everything north of 118 is all
more,
housing.
it's more than double the amount of housing that Olympia is. It's 12 to 15,000 more housing units out there. Yeah.
So that's, at least for me, that's why I've said I'm open to the idea. Let's take the necessary steps to at least explore it. And man, there's a lot of heavy lifting and tons of details and years of work before we get there.
It's a really, it's a very unique vision to create that kind of for lack of a better term, it's a small urban center around a transit zone way out in the suburbs. You know what I mean? That is a really unique thing. But if you talk to the Wasatch Front Regional Council and their plans for the west side, they specifically identified areas that they want to be quote unquote town centers or city centers where there's employment and services and transportation so that people don't have to go all the way out to I-15 or Redwood Road to get, you know, a lot of the services and amenities that are that way. They'll be able to stay in this area, this southwest region, and take care of a lot of that stuff here. That's a potentially pretty substantial tax draw. I mean, you'd think of something on the scale of like a Farmington Station size with a big housing component combined with that retail presence, right? That's kind of the idea of what they'd be talking about, something along that line. Now, how that looks, what commitments are made, that's, I can't speak to any of that stuff.
This tool addresses two components. What's been my frustration with the state expectations or the pressure that's been placed on us and other communities here in the southwest part of the county is that our development partners really need some kind of incentive to preserve those centers. The centers that Wasatch Front Regional Council is trying to prop up to disperse that transportation impact, right? Just as you said, Steve, creating centers that would then become a draw. I think this would help do that, this type of incentive, this financial incentive to identify and preserve those centers for that kind of development. The second frustration is having all of this growth, but none of the infrastructure. And this type of tool, if it were to come to fruition, would commit our state and regional partners with transportation planning, specifically transit planning. We would identify that transit hub. The whole thing banks around whether or not there's a commitment in that regional transportation plan to establish a hub in the center. It all falls apart if that's not done. But again, those are two components I think have been missing from this whole conversation. If you can't do that, it feels like, well, growth needs to go back towards where the infrastructure already exists.
And frankly, it's not just about it's not just about Olympia, right?
Right.
Olympia is going to have a profound impact on the transportation infrastructure in the area. We already know that, right? When that's fully built out, it's going to be a ton of traffic. And with U-111 coming down this way, it's going to be more traffic. 126 South, they're predicting, is going to be like University Parkway. It'll have that kind of traffic on a daily basis, right? It's going to, by 2050, it'll be like University Parkway is right now.
Without commitment from the legislature
Right.
and those parts, we're gonna keep getting what we've gotten. So that's at least, I think, our hope is.
Yeah, and that's just with the creation of Olympia. That's not counting what's just been quote unquote entitled to Rio Tinto with the annexation of this other land into South Jordan. I mean, you're talking about between Olympia and this other land, 70,000 people. And you can't service those people with 5-lane roads and no transportation of any kind. And so if there is the possibility of creating a transit hub for this area to allow people to connect to the larger public transportation infrastructure, I think we have to look into it more. I think we need to figure out if we can do it.
And most of these other places, I mean, if we're able to have that kind of hub here, then usually some road funding dollars come with it, because that's, I mean, this is, so just so you guys know, I live right here. I'm probably the closest. The mayor doesn't live too far away over here, right? I mean, this is huge, like C said, all of this coming down, all of South Jordan's population. There's two roads, 118th and 126th. 126 is right here, right?
And 134, some of these are going to jump out the bottom there too. So.
I also think that PIDs are going to play a big role impact to this because they can actually get the money up front, bond for it, get out in front of the infrastructure. And so when we do get those government money, like the state money or the federal money, they can go right to use. They're shovel-ready projects.
Yeah, and there's if you include a PID just around the amount of units they're going to put in there, the tax dollars would be extraordinary. There's a lot of money that can be used to create the infrastructure there.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I want to hear from the commission now. You've heard council.
Yeah, to
clarify, so we're talking best case scenario, we move forward, everything goes sweet, everyone gets along, and we get a hub right there. And then we're able to use that as incentive to get commercial on our side. And that works out successfully. And so the hub turns into basically a rail station is what we're talking about, right? The hope, best case scenario.
Rapid transit, so.
So it'd be a bus rapid
Bus rapid transit.
Kind of like
Could there be potential down the road with that discussion of expanding the red line that it could filter down to
I'm open
this?
to that, but
You
it's.
could, it sounds like Red Line wants to go down to the point, kind of circle, go
Right.
down towards.
not west, but they
Slick
want to go south.
and-
And that's where-
Wherever there's a BRT, so I don't know if you've seen BRT and how it works, it's a designated lane for buses. It can always be turned into rail if the state
Right.
wants to.
It's like Provo.
But that's beyond us, right? It's-
Okay, so we're talking, this is basically best case scenario then is bus rapid transit for this point. It would be more of a pipe dream to get a rail into there,
Yes.
Quite frankly, it might be a pipe dream
to get the bus rapid transit, sure, but.
right?
I think it's a pipe dream to get a single bus route.
We're more positive, things are going well.
My concern is most of us don't use it today. And so I like the commercial component where we can bring in big retailers, maybe create a center for us, but I don't know. What UTA is doing now isn't really working, I would say, for most of us. I still drive to work every day. I go down to Farmington. I could get on their station, so I'm concerned. I like what we get from the overlay, but as far as helping traffic, I don't see it helping traffic without UDOT saying we're gonna turn 118 or 126 into a freeway or highway or something else. So for me, it's like benefit to us for the commercial, but really bad for traffic still.
Yeah, so if you increase to 50 units per acre, and I agree with everything that you've said, 100%, but just in echoing what you're saying, now you have a ton more density,
The road dollars.
and then
don't come with it.
nobody's using the BRT anyway, then that's really impactful to your community.
Then that's
And
worse.
What's the ridership kind of question?
And I think, Brody, I think all of us would probably agree with you. I mean, it's like, it can't be a cart before the horse thing here, right? It
Yeah.
all has to be
Right.
walked hand in hand every step along the line.
It'd be interesting to know, like, this is, what, a half-mile diameter, so a quarter-mile radius? Those circles up there?
Yeah.
So that would be the overlay, is just one small portion, not the entire development.
Right.
And so that,
a certain amount of acres, right?
right, so a half-mile diameter is about 500 acres. So even if it was at that new U-111 intersection, you're only getting 3/4 of that, that's gonna be within the overlay, because the rest is in South Jordan, right?
We would do the overlay just in our city.
In our
though.
site.
Right. But what I'm saying, though, is that the amount of acreage that's actually under this overlay would be pretty minimal
It's-
in comparison to the
It
rest of the
would probably
development.
be something like 100 acres.
We would,
Yeah, so there's a max of 100 acres for BRT, for the bus rapid transit.
Right.
The roads aren't, those layouts are wrong. U-111 actually shifts over, but.
Right,
The density, so SB 217 set up the program, SB 140 a little while, if you read 217, you'll see the buses don't count. SB 140 a few years later, or in 2022, added the bus rapid transit, but it also clarified the units per acre only applies to the residentially zoned properties in there. So it's not, the original bill said it's 50 units per developable acre. They struck that language. So if it's commercial, they don't get units for that. They get their density. Now, if it's mixed use, they would get, and they go vertical, they could do that, right? That would make, I think, would make the most sense. But just so when you're thinking it, it's not, if it's 100 acres, it's not 5,000 units. It depends on how many units they, how many residential acres they actually have.
Right.
And again, it's 40, a minimum of 40 for the BRT, max of 49 that you have to do. So as long as you do, well, actually, I think it's minimum of 39.
I think it's
You would qualify.
14.
Right, so right now, those town centers you know, they're 20-plus units.
Correct.
So, in certain areas, and that's pretty much the bulk of it, you know, in that section, that's where you're talking about.
Yeah, you're
Mixed use
correct.
anyways. So what's the difference between the town center 20-plus units versus the minimum, you know, 43, or what would you say, 39 units?
So 39, and they'll say that says 20 plus, meaning it could be much more than 20.
Right.
There's been some argument, hey, we don't even have to amend the MDA if we do this. I think we should clarify that. But if you do it, you know, over 100 acres, what is that, an additional 19 or 20 units? So I think when we met with them, they thought an additional 1,400 or 1,800 units, depending on how it was laid out. They still have to park it.
They'd like us just to add them, I think most of us would want some combination.
Yeah, and because you still have to, we have to understand you're gonna have to park some of these because I think the statement is a lot of people don't use the transit. For when it works, it's great. If it doesn't work, people out in the west still tend to have a car. Even if they use transit every day, it's not like New York City, they probably have a car. So we do have to make sure that that fits in there, and that the plans they've shown us actually had some structured parking in some of these units.
So I'd like to hear from the commission, any other thoughts on this? Brody, I appreciate your thoughts. Any other thoughts from the?
Well, what I like about exploring this is it shows we're doing our part, right? I mean, it says we would like some kind of transit out here, whether everyone switches to transit and doesn't have cars, if we reduce the amount of cars, reduce the amount that we use our cars. Just the meetings that I've sat in, they like to blame it on us that we haven't created the pathways for the transit, right? But if we say we are interested, we're exploring things, and you need to come partner up with us. So that's what I like about exploring this idea.
Is there like a guarantee in place where if they install the transit, they can't take it away later?
Probably not.
Probably not, but that's a huge
No.
investment
So
of
much
money.
money.
Though,
Yeah.
probably
Yeah.
in millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions, of dollars. Probably 300 million to do a
Yeah.
BRT.
But, I mean, you're talking between all of the residential units that would be constructed, the commercial units that would be constructed, the bus station, you know, that would have to be built, all of this stuff. I mean, I think you're talking multiple 9 figures of infrastructure investment in a 100-acre area.
Well,
That's a huge deal,
If you're
right?
talking about just UTA, like, or just the station, I mean, the cost to construct the station, the cost for the road lanes for the buses, right? The length of whatever the route is, I mean, just that cost is astronomical.
Yeah, I mean, my concern is,
Just the road.
I feel like we need to interview a lot of people and say, what would be an alternative mode of transportation for you versus a car? Or maybe it's, for me, it's like, you need light rail, you need rapid bus, you need bike lanes, car sharing, bike share, like all those options to legitimately say, hey, we reduced traffic and people are using other modes of transportation besides just a bus.
I don't think we're going to ever reduce traffic, but we're going to mitigate the growth of all the traffic. If we're talking the next 30 years, like we're going to make it a little more manageable. And so we won't be able to prove that, but it is going to just grow and grow. And if someone has a bus rapid transit close by and doesn't have to sit through traffic and can work on the way to work or work on the way back, then maybe the roads won't get as crowded as fast.
I guess to your point, it's really, traffic's not bad enough. That's true, right? Like, if it was so bad, then we would say, I'm gonna go sit on the train for 2 hours because driving takes 3.
Right.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah, I mean-
LA has public transit transportation and most people sit in gridlock on a freeway. A lot of it is culture in the West. I'm not suggesting that it's not a good idea at all, but there's a culture hurdle to overcome with people in the West too. People drive their cars. I think that just I think that to me, it's somewhat of a no-brainer that we say, yeah, we'll adopt this. When Pitts first came to us, we're like, okay, we'll adopt a policy, and it was very rigid, and it was just so that we could say that we have a policy in place. And there's so many other questions. Yeah. There's so many other questions to answer, and where are we going to be in the line of possibilities with this? You know, I think that we have some people who are lobbying hard with certain individuals to get this done on the development side. But I think it's great if we can just maybe get a little more tax revenue coming in on the other side. I'm not holding out a huge amount of hope that there'll be a huge spike in ridership because we've never seen it. I'm not holding out a whole lot of hope that we're going to see a great deal of better use of our tax money at UTA, quite frankly, either. But and that's not an attack on any individual. That's just that somehow the system seems rather broken to me. But if this is what the options that we have, this is a good option.
I think it's not like ride or commuting, but it's more once you're home, you don't want to get the truck out or the van out, you run to the shopping center or something. It's for those day trips, or go to the park that's around the corner. You can get down farther down the street rather than driving and leaving your house multiple trips throughout the day. You got soccer practice, you can throw the kids in the bus and go, that sort of thing, where it's not where you're leaving your community again, over and over again, and creating those multiple trips out of the community.
I think to Sherry's point, I think if you grew up in New York and you didn't have a car, and like it's almost like we have to like have a generation that is in that situation to then have it work, right? If you've gotten accustomed to driving a car, like you said, you'll get in the car and wait in traffic a long time. But if you grew up in New York, there was a lady that she's like, I don't have a driver's license.
Yeah.
I lived in New
Bro,
York.
there's so many things. I mean, if we're just from a point of view of conjecture, right? None of us can know for sure, but when you look at the increasing costs of housing, right? One of the more realistic analysis points for whether or not housing is affordable is the H+T index, right? It's housing plus transportation costs. Yeah. And when you have to pay $500,000 for a townhouse, and then you have to own a car that has to drive an hour round trip every day for work commute, right? Your cost of housing becomes extraordinary, right?
Yeah.
If there's a way to cut out the cost of the transportation part of it, you make housing more affordable.
Sure.
And so the argument behind creating housing density, right, is that there's smaller, hopefully less expensive units. That's supposedly, right?
Don't go down that hole.
Right, I'm not getting- right. But let's just say that there's a different kind of housing type, right?
Yeah.
And maybe not having to have multiple transportation.
Or they have one parking stall, or yeah.
Right, that kind of
all
thing.
that stuff.
It can make the ability to afford housing more attainable, I guess, right?
Oh, yeah.
It's cost of living expenses.
Right, cost of living is right.
Cost of living, we have all that data from the Southwest Vision study we did a couple years ago. Our area has the highest cost of living. And I don't think you could say this now, but say 5 years ago when we started that study, you'd say that an equal home maybe purchase price is less here than in other parts of the valley, but then the cost of commuting and all those things, higher water costs, all the things we've talked about, the cost of living is much higher than others.
Yeah.
And now I'd say that the cost of purchase price is a lot higher.
Yeah, so you're talking, I guess I'm just saying, there might be market forces that drive the adoption of this type of transportation model that we're just not necessarily fully analyzed. And again, it's all conjecture, right? Nobody knows for sure.
Well, and it's market forces, and it's also having the density.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, UTA is not successful in Harriman because Harriman is a suburb.
Plus, it's not provided.
Right, it's very limitedly provided. And so you know, they're not going to increase the ridership, they're not gonna increase the routes in Harriman if you don't have that density, you know, that's required. And so, it's kinda like,
When you have to have, I think it's, I would call them more focal points, so you mentioned WFRC and
Yeah,
whatnot, right?
yeah.
There need to be
Yes.
focal points where a large number of people are moving between those
Right.
points. The hard part, I
yeah, there's
have a hard
centers,
time
like town
saying-
centers, neighborhood centers, yeah.
I have a hard time comparing us to New York or any other place that has a really good transportation system. If you've been to New York City, you can't compare even Los Angeles to New York City. It's like, it's apples and, I always say, comparing apples and bowling balls, right?
Yeah.
They're like, you can't even begin to compare them. And the biggest issue out here is that things are so spread out. In my day, just today, there's no way I could use public transportation in anything I did today, because I had to be in literally seven different places to see different clients and be back here and soccer meeting and everything else. And there's no way public transportation can service that, because we have Wasatch Front and maybe a couple of spokes, and that's it. There's so much in between, there's no way to use it. One last thing I'll just mention for transportation. For me, it's not necessarily about BRT for the transportation. I hope this doesn't come back to bite me the way I say this, but I don't think that moves the needle, to your point of congestion and gridlock, et cetera. To me, it's a starting point to get the right people who control the state dollars to put more transportation dollars this way. Having gone through the Southwest Visioning Study and dealt with all of those organizations and decision makers, quite frankly, to this point, they just don't care about this area, right? There are other more important things, and they're behind in other areas, and this is new and growing, and we can think about it later, right? If there's some focal points that they're interested in, right, and they've committed some dollars there, then that's where we get the right people talking, and they care about what's happening there, and other dollars and projects follow.
And frankly, when you look at the activity that's going on in South Jordan with the Miller Group investment out there, and I mean, they're gonna be dropping billions of dollars around the new ballpark and, you know, all the infrastructure that's going in around that. It's definitely a regional draw, right? And I think this is an opportunity to leverage what's going on in this area of the valley to bring the attention of those that are controlling the purse strings out this way. You know, when you look at Mountain View Village, when you look at what's going in South Jordan, when you look what's potentially going in out here, you're only talking, you know, 20 blocks away from all of each other with all this stuff. And I think you could make a case that it's more of a regional transportation infrastructure rather than just saying, we're gonna extend a point out to just right here.
Yeah.
It's this tying into the huge station that they're gonna be building out in Daybreak and tying into the south, you know, the campuses that are down there and stuff that Riverton needs and,
Athletic
you know.
complex, the recreation that's being developed, you know, in the mountains by us, it's those sorts of things that we can start to get some attention.
So like, I'm for the tool, totally, because I think it's like what Olympia wanted originally, but now we actually get a benefit in participating with them.
Exactly.
So even if none of the transportation were to transpire, but we have this overlay, are we still able to use the tax advantage to draw business?
No.
It has to actually come to fruition.
All of that has to happen first
Yeah.
before we would even use the overlay.
The stop, the route, and the approval of the HTRZ all have to come
It's all gonna be
together.
pretty much simultaneous, yeah.
Unless the state passes another law that gives us back the tax incentive.
And what's the time frame for this development and for how long the tool takes to develop? And can that,
They're trying to get in line pretty quick, because there's only 3, I think.
3 in each county. The timeline, so no one parcel can pay longer than a specified amount of time in 45, and I think for the BRTs, it's 15 years. I think the light rail is maybe 25 years, so it's like a CDA that exists for 15 years, right? You pull the trigger, you have time to decide when to do it, so you wouldn't do it day one, you'd wait till all the infrastructure is built, everything's there. Then they would do it to capture the state, all this money from the state to pay back essentially those developers. It's not really an incentive to a retail store. They would be, this is how they're funding the infrastructure.
Okay, that helps.
Do we know, do we have any idea what kind of competition is out there, other sites that are considering this?
On the light rail, there have been a few already approved, and then,
There's 8 for light rail, right?
eight per county. So they have touched this section every legislative session since I think it went in. So what we're saying is what happened the last in 2023. They're going to meet again in January. Who knows what they're going to do to it? But,
gonna change.
so Farmington has one. Who else got theirs
That's on
approved?
Salt Lake County though.
I think Vineyard, there are different places have gone through, so you have to apply through, you do the studies, you apply through for us, the Wasatch Front Regional Choice, and then it goes up to, I think, the governor's EOC, and they have to approve it before it all goes through.
We don't know of any other sites that.
There are others, I don't know any BRTs right at the moment.
Yeah, the hard part is that because of the density requirement around the area, there's not a lot of greenfield areas to create that, or infill where you could build that much density around to support it. So it's kind of a,
We've been forced to,
Yeah,
we've been
we're-
forced to accept this
Yeah,
density,
it
and
kind of-
like you said, how can we make the most of it?
I mean,
Yeah.
this zoning concept kind of feels like a potential lemonade out of lemons situation, right? Is
It
what we're
does,
talking
right?
about. They're handed it, I mean, it's there, might as well go for it, kind of a situation.
yeah, it's almost like if you can't beat them, join them, right? I mean,
I'm not gonna go that far. What can we get out of them?
Yeah,
And this is just a tool that says, we're serious about this, let's continue those conversations and see where we go.
And I think that's really all we're asking for tonight, is if the group is willing, there are a lot of steps that have to go into it, one of which is you have to do an analysis. So right now, we've been talking to the developer, this would be on their shoulders to pay the consultant, do the analysis. They do this big analysis that shows why it would work and the need, and then that goes to the state. So another consultant the state hires that the entity, the city pays for, reviews it to see that it makes sense. So if you're in that consulting business, this is a good law for you. But, so there's a lot of steps we're gonna have to go
It
through.
sounds like we would need quite a bit of PR/political movement as
And-
well. Would we be able to get kind of that support from a few of our representatives in this? I'm talking state
To answer your
level.
question, there's lots of lobbying efforts.
Yeah,
Yeah,
there's a lot going on.
that's my question.
Yes.
I would just put it this way. If you look at
I wish you were that powerful.
let me just say this without saying it, okay? If you look at the amount of money that the legislature has awarded for transportation infrastructure, corridor preservation, those types of things over the last couple of sessions, this area has gotten a very substantially disproportionate share of those funds, mostly around the U-111 creation. And that is a direct result of some very well organized lobbying efforts. And I think those same lobbying efforts are being leveraged for this as well. So I think we have some good allies to help make this happen.
Steve, are those allies the developers?
On the developer side and the state rep side.
Yeah, it's a combination of a lot of interests, right?
I would say, we put it this way, sometimes all the stars align and everybody's priorities line up. That's just,
Yeah.
sometimes that works out.
Temporarily have common interests.
So, thinking about this, there's only 3 allowed per county, correct? So, the main competition for this is the one just north of us, that is going in.
But I think they're gonna be a light rail.
Yeah, there's a slight.
It's
They are-
different
they
than
are
bus.
planning light rail?
Yeah,
This one here, not Daybreak, not the ballpark, but this one here, right above us.
but see, they won't,
No, they, well,
Are they
There's,
interested?
I don't think they're.
They're different, let's be clear, they're different. The ballpark is.
they're
part of
15
Old
years
Daybreak.
behind us.
Yeah.
Right, but if I was them, I'd be starting right now,
think the main
saying, hey, this is
They're
what we're gonna
they're
do.
trying,
Right.
but they have a different vision.
Sure.
So, and that's part of what makes this even more a compelling argument is
Yeah.
their vision is daybreak. Their vision is just more housing with shared yards and density and just master planned
Little
housing
tiny
community.
Things here.
Yeah,
I don't
with
think they'll
like,
get- I
you
don't
know,
think they're gonna get close to 40 units per
So
acre.
the row here there.
oh no, they're gonna be,
Or-
they're
or
5.5
either-
units an acre is
Yeah.
what they're at, right?
Or another kind of commercial center or focal point like they have right now. I mean,
Right.
they're struggling to make that work in that location. So, I mean, the rest of it is, they're just doing more housing, that's it.
Okay, so really, I guess, any concerns? We don't need to belabor this. If there's anybody that can belabor a topic, it's your city council. So.
Really, the overlay itself is probably the easiest
Yeah.
part.
Yeah.
I mean, and again, it doesn't really commit us to anything. It just provides that tool that allows,
Conversation.
yeah,
The-
to move
the other
forward.
stuff.
Allows our lobbying
Yeah.
efforts to continue.
Yeah.
I don't see it
Any
probably.
concerns, Daryl, anybody?
No, not with doing this overlay, this study. I think it's probably a good thing. I mean, obviously, there's effort involved, and if Mike's the champion of it, he's going to need everyone's influence, but
Yeah, and Blake has been really heavily involved in the project, so.
I just would like shrewd people to make sure that they're analyzing what our partners on the other side are doing.
To quote the mayor, have you met your city council?
They have.
Oh, wow, that backfired a little.
You know, from working with the state on so many different levels, I know that their interests are not here in Harriman. But they could be. I mean, if you get the right people in front of them, that strike up friendships and build something out of it, it could happen. And then I'm kind of in this quandary. I know growth is good and we need it, and especially the commercial. In the commission, we're always trying to figure out how to get commercial. We would love neighborhood markets popping up here and there, so I don't have to go forever. I didn't realize those neighborhood markets were going to become mavericks and come and goes, but that's what they are. I think we need it. It's just hard to give up our slogan from years back. We are Harriman. You know, I moved here because it felt rural, even though I worked in the city. It's kind of losing that feeling. Or frankly, it probably already has lost that feeling to some level.
In this area, I mean.
So
it's-
we just
it's
need to be
lemons.
smart about this. I'm okay with the tool. Let's go for it.
Yeah.
Preston, any concern?
I just don't think, I can definitely sympathize with Daryl's perspective on that. I just think with this particular area we're talking about, I mean, there is going to be zero fill of that, and that's just nothing we were ever gonna be able to control in the first place.
Again, if that affects anybody in this room, it's me.
Yeah. And so, having the overlay, I think it's such a minimal move for at least a swing for the fences, so to speak. I don't see a downside that would even come close to outweighing the upside potential.
Okay. Tara, you good?
Yep, good option to explore.
Okay. Andrew?
Yeah, I'm just wondering, so like the commercial part of it, can we have any say in what type of commercial goes there?
And, I mean, that could be an option that comes back in the MDA discussion. I mean, that, again, anytime an MDA is open, it does offer an opportunity for us to kind of negotiate and get some rounds for the city, I would say. So, but I'll say the plans that we've seen are, and this would be different. Olympia would be bringing in some high-power commercial developers that would bring in some.
It's a different scale of commercial. It's not like a retail commercial center. This is like I mean, it's almost like planning a downtown. Like it's not very big, so I don't want to think of it that scale, but it's that level of land use intensity, right? In a very, very small area, you need it has to be a comprehensive plan, not just you get this lot and you get to build this unit here, right? I mean, it's,
And then
You
the
have to
thing
have
to
a
think about
master
with this
plan.
too is
yeah.
to
A
get,
master plan inside of a master plan, yeah.
Exactly.
to get the qualified for the increment, the more revenue that's generated as far as sales tax, or that's beneficial in this because it pays it back faster. So it will be, they're not gonna go out and look for your dentist office, your credit union, like, nothing against it, but they're not gonna be looking for that because those won't pay back that increment fast enough. There will need to be some sort of retail, some sort of shopping, that signed, restaurants, that kind of. So it will almost guarantee, just by the
Small movie
nature of the
theater was
tool, yeah,
suggested,
it'll
that
have to
kind of
be.
stuff, yeah.
So, a lot of interest already from other, yeah, so.
Yeah, gathering space kind of in the center, and there was some cool ideas. It's all, I mean, it's all fantasy at this point, but,
Brody, any concerns? I know where the council's at already. Any-
Yeah,
You good?
I'm good with it. I like what it can do as far as us getting money for density.
Forrest,
Yeah.
good? Just right up your alley, I know that.
No, I think it's a good idea. and
No, I'm just saying,
It gives you lots of options, and as long as we can be thoughtful about, like you said, making a master plan of that area, that'll prevent some of the kind of, 50-plus units per acre just to cram in housing, so.
okay. So I think pretty unanimous kind of where the council is. Michael, you good? Anything else?
Yeah, I emailed to the commission the 2023 amendment that talks more about the bus rapid transit and some of those standards. And I apologize, that was not included in your packet, and I didn't realize that until we had this conversation tonight. So you'll have that for reference as we bring this back to you.
Okay.
Yeah, as Nathan just said, anticipate further amendments, right, in 2024. So, thank you.
Okay, we appreciate the discussion tonight. Good discussion. Future meeting, next planning commission meeting next Wednesday at 7 o'clock, general meeting, and then city council meeting the following Wednesday, the 13th, at 7 o'clock as well. Any other events we want to mention? Have we got everybody? Any other events we want to mention?
Oh, you got senior bingo.
21st?
There's something else.
Hal was coming up.
7,300.
Oh, yes. That's next Thursday night.
At 6? Or 6:30?
6:30.
6:30.
Okay.
There's Utah Board of Football game.
Yeah. They actually used
They had a fly out of Florida day early.
They play high school games on Thursday now?
because of the hurricane.
$5,000.
Yeah, that's when, normally when BYU plays, so.
And I will say, I will throw a plug in for the farmer's market on Mondays. Please, they're struggling a little bit, so if you've got a chance, please spread the word that they've got a lot of farmers out now. They had 4 or 5 really legit farmers out this last week, so there's more and more produce there. So it's hurting, our local people that are there too are hurting. So if you can make an effort on Monday nights to come out, food trucks and farmer's market on Monday nights, every Monday through the Howl on October 15th.
Are they doing Labor Day as well?
They are doing Labor Day,
Okay.
so. And then the play
Oh,
coming
yeah.
up, the youth and children's production coming up on the
Suzical and James and the
21st,
Giant Peach.
that weekend of the 21st through 24th or something like that. So if you buy 2 puzzles from them, you get 2 tickets. No puzzle, if you buy a puzzle, you get 2 tickets.
And
You
they're,
don't have your Herman City puzzle yet. Okay, look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.